hope so. Hi, I'm Kirsten and this is Jeffrey from Ascendimo. Today we're going to be having a conversation about self-knowing and how to get direction in your life generally, but also in your career.
It's a really interesting topic, and I always learn something when I'm talking to you about this, Kirsten. So I guess, what do we actually mean by self-knowing, and how's that going to play into career?
We had a conversation last time about career confusion, and it's really important to, in a system that is confusing, the more you can know yourself and what appeals to you and your strengths and capabilities, the better placed you are to make progress. And so I think that a fundamental starting point in assessing career and career development is very much about staying in a place of being self-aware, like constantly having an assessment of where you're at and where you want to get to. So I think there's a couple of things. There's obviously a whole stack of tools that you can use, like in terms of profiling. And if you go and see a career coach, they will use a number of those different tools in terms of capabilities, strengths, values, and that sort of thing. But there's something that's very, very important, I believe, in having a greater level of understanding, and that is gained through your interactions with other people.
So you're saying self-aware. I get that, and we've got tools that we can use to know ourselves better. There's all sorts of things. I get that, but what are we trying to be aware of? Where's that, and how does that fit in? Is, I guess, what I'm thinking for our career perspective. And
yeah, in terms of being self-aware, I think we can get caught up and be, you can sort of be going through the motions, but not really being conscious of what it is that really piques your interest, things that stretch you, and just things that you're innately good at and things that you have to work to become better at. And I think that being self-aware is understanding where you are at any point in time in your life and in your career. And that is just being very clear on those things, but also then working out what are the gaps, like identifying where you want to get to and how you're going to get there. And I think that sort of comes back into that deep level of self-knowing, is being very sort of alert to the fact that you've got to know what position you're in at the moment, understand how you got there, and in terms of education and experience and that sort of thing, but also then what point do you want to get to, because then there's a gap between those two spaces, and working out how you're going to travel that journey to become that person that you're moving towards, whether it be in any sort of area of life. I think it's really important to have that sort of center point of being very self-aware of where you're at as a starting point.
So to me, if I could summarize that if I'm being self-aware now, then I'm considering all my experiences from the past that have got me to here, what my current strengths and weaknesses are, and with both of those things in mind, strengths and weaknesses in my past, how do I use that to get to where I want to be in the future?
Absolutely. And I think what happens too is there's an expression which is when golden threads. So throughout your career, you'll have had times when you were really engaged with what you were doing. You might have won an award, you've been recognized for the efforts, and then obviously maybe promoted or given opportunities to work on particular projects. And so that's why it's really fundamental to have a look back at the past, because you can see elements of what you've done that really stand out, and that can then inform the process moving forward. And so I think that's a very good point you make there about that, going, looking at your past career, because you can start to filter out things that I think everybody's had both positive and negative experiences in a work environment, what you want to move towards and what you want to move away from as well.
So you touched on earlier about your connection with others. Now, self-aware, but we're talking about others. How does that help?
Yeah, again, I think even that concept of the golden threads, it works really well, because we've probably, I know I have, and I know you have too, worked with particular people who have inspired us, who have given us opportunities to work on amazing projects, recognized something in us that we probably weren't aware of at the time and didn't know we could do, because they provided us with an opportunity. And I think that having mentors throughout your career is fundamental. I think that you have to have somebody who can help you stretch beyond what you think you're capable of doing, and having that feedback. And I think with your interactions with other people, it's an opportunity for a greater level of self-awareness, because people can see things in others that they can often not see in themselves. And that can be because they've traveled that journey and they've got more experience, and they were possibly where we are, like at a point in time, and they've gotten past that. So I think that those interactions are really important. And I suppose that's a really good question, like, is what makes a good mentor? Like that, I'd be interested, what's your view on that?
We've spoken about this in the past, and I think it's the level of engagement encouraging you to do something that you've already expressed interest in. You're already showing the lead in some way, but you may have shown the lead, but they're then able to provide those resources, provide the encouragement, provide a little bit of accountability in getting you towards where they're currently at. So you're looking at someone who is typically further ahead than you. Now, it might be a little bit further ahead, or it might be a lot further ahead. But it's also, to me, there's a few mentors I've had who I probably didn't even recognize as mentors at the time. And so that's an important component of it in some ways, that they're encouraging you and building you up and pushing you in the right direction. And it doesn't need to be a formal mentoring relationship that's documented and planned out by everyone. It can just be that trying to get the better out of your mentors are helping you get the better side of yourself out for what those common interests are.
Yeah, I think the point you make about it's a continuum. So you've got, like, you can be new in a career, or you can be extremely experienced and have a level of expertise, and everyone fits somewhere along that sort of spectrum. And it's just being able to recognize where you're at, so that you can see who's ahead of you, in the hope that you can probably get some really good input and guidance, so that you can travel along that sort of towards that level of achievement. And also having recognized where you're at, and understanding and appreciating that there are people who are sort of have less experience, that you could potentially give guidance to them as well. So I think it's important to be aware that it's a two-way. Like, it's great being mentored, but it's also a privilege to be able to provide someone else with some guidance and support and inspiration in the form of informal mentorship, or even if it is a formal arrangement. But I think that it's something that helps us all to make great progress.
And we've both touched on it there slightly, but I do think, while I even just indicated they don't need to be far ahead of you, that just in some way, I think a mentor is a little bit further ahead, whereas it might be a colleague or someone maybe they're in the same position as you, but they're in a different organization. So we're doing the same job, but we work for different companies. We're about the same level. Might not necessarily be a mentor, but that might be more of an accountability partner, whereas the mentor is actually a few steps ahead. you're not sort of dealing with things at the same level.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we can all, even when on surface value we appear to be at the same level as somebody, I think it's always really good to understand that people do things differently, and we can always learn from how other people do it. You don't necessarily have to follow it completely, but I do feel that it's important to remain flexible and understand that everybody has a different approach, and be willing to listen to hear if someone has got a different way of doing things that you might not have thought of. I think that's another advantage of having an accountability partner, is just being open to having that level of input. And I think it's really beneficial.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How do you find a mentor? Like, I guess I'd throw that at you, because we discussed that I've had mentors, and the ones that I reflect on as mentors are people who we were in the same circle, and therefore I was lucky to get their support and assistance. But it does depend on what you're engaged in, how else do you go about finding a mentor?
Yeah, that's a really good question. There's a number of ways that you can do it, because obviously there is the paid mentorship, like you can pay someone to be a mentor, but that's a different kind of, that's not available to everybody. And then you've got people within your network that could potentially be a mentor. And I think the other one that's a really good way to consider is joining a professional network, because then you have a whole spectrum of people with, like a range of experience. And quite often in those environments, members are willing to be supportive, because that's the nature of being in a professional like in a professional association. So that's another way that you can go about it.
And I guess you and I both know what they are, but I guess professional association, I guess we need to probably provide a bit of information on that. And here in Australia, at least, I see them in two ways. They're very focused on an industry area. So you're in a particular industry, whether that's plumbing or education, whatever your industry is, you're in an industry and there's an association that is related to that industry in some way. But we often have localized collectives or associations, like your local business network or local business chamber. In sometimes I actually think some of the good information you can get and the good mentoring is in those associations, because you're coming from different industries and therefore you've got very different perspectives. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good point. Again, that's that whole concept of how one industry does something could be different but also beneficial, like to have that exposure. I think that's true. And I think the other way too is there are a lot of people who feel very passionate about what they work in and what they work on, and they are in, say, LinkedIn or on other social media platforms, and they will have started a page or something like that, and you can engage in those forums as well. And it's really surprising how many people want to be helpful. And so I think if you're engaging in different groups and things like that, you can even pose questions if you're trying to work out how you can make progress and things like that. So I think that there's a multitude of ways. It's just recognizing that you can benefit from speaking with other people and learn more about yourself and how you can make progress through those interactions. So I think it's taking the initiative really to connect with people.
And I would agree with you that the more if you're willing to ask the questions, people are willing to help. But in thinking about that, so we've come from talking about being self-aware into what is a mentor and how do we get mentors? Coming back, how do the mentors help us with that self-awareness?
I think there's a number of ways that happens. It's if you're in the middle of a situation, quite often you will have a set perspective on what to do. And when I think when you've got a problem, having someone who's standing on the outside looking in can provide feedback and see things that you potentially can't see. And we're limited to what we know. So if we don't know something, having somebody external to us provide that feedback and that input is really important. I think that's a role that the mentor does, is that we've discussed this before, in that we will have our plans and then it's like, right, that's what I'm doing, and having somebody provide some input. And like you and I have had many conversations where we say what we're doing, and then either of us will then pose a question, and through that questioning, then it takes us on a bit of a journey to expand the concept of what we thought we were doing, and then through that interaction, so asking the right questions and then sort of providing input and information on alternative ways of doing things, or drawing attention to something that's been done that could be beneficial to learn from. I think there's a number of ways.
So earlier we sort of said, right, I'm self-aware, I've got my experiences, I get to know my strengths and weaknesses, and I know where I'm going. But the mentor's in the middle of that going, you know what, there's other alternatives, and maybe you're not seeing your strengths and weaknesses, others see it. And you might be stronger than you actually think you are. And your weaknesses aren't as bad as you think they are. And there's other ways of getting to your end goal.
Absolutely. And I think, it's just, you can't see the wood for the trees, I think is the expression. And having somebody who's obviously standing on the mountain looking across can see ways that would be beneficial. And we go through life, I think, with a filter, because we're the sum total of our life's experiences. And so if we haven't had particular experiences, we can't draw from that. And that's the advantage of having that input, is someone who's had a different set of experiences, and quite often have had huge challenges that they've had to overcome. And so through that, they've had like a significant amount of learning and growth. So having that input of someone who has navigated troubled waters or solved problems, having access to that is really fundamental for our particular growth as well.
Yes. Now, the other thing, we keep referring to mentors, and that's great. We're in many ways, we're actually talking about the mentees getting a mentor.
Yes, absolutely.
But then I know you and I have discussed in the past, what does it take to actually put yourself out there as a mentor and give back to those who might need it?
Yeah, I think we're all in this together, and we can, like, it's both about receiving and giving, and it's just making, and I think people do it without even realizing it, like, parents to children, like that's a mentoring arrangement, so there are numerous ways, but I think it's really important that to recognize wherever you're at, you've got something to give.
Yeah.
And if you can, in your own interactions with people, be encouraging and inspiring, you don't necessarily have to formalize that, but it's certainly, I think, in a work environment, it's really important to encourage people to take initiative, and you can do it in an informal way, with pretty much, in any environment. You can be that person that encourages, be that person that puts belief in somebody else. So you can obviously go, like, you can do mentoring training, or you can join, there's all sorts of different organizations where you could become like a mentor to somebody. But it's also, I think, just in every day, try and be that person who is encouraging someone else to believe in themselves and to make progress, towards something that makes them feel alive.
Yeah. And really, they're the mentors regardless. And it's just interesting that we tend to focus the mentoring onto particular areas. So I think that's because we recognise the strengths of certain people right, you're good at that, so I'll use you as a mentor there. How do you see that?
I think that's a really good point. We have multiple areas in our lives that we have to navigate. That can be the obvious one for mentoring is always career. That's always the case. But our lives are made up of multiple sort of life domains. And I think, there's financial, there's health, there's all sorts of self-expression. I think it's taking the time to understand where you're at with each of those things. And like a really good process is to sort of identify the key areas of your life and then basically rate it out of 10. And, just how, in terms of your level of satisfaction, because that's going to give you the feedback on whether you need to do something about it. So say, for instance, if from a health perspective, you're not feeling great, is to be really sort of up front with yourself and give an honest rating to that and go, okay, why am I feeling that way? Why am I not, not 8, 9, 10? Why am I, like, let's say, for instance, you felt like you're a 5 in terms of in the area of health. Why is that so? And then working out, well, who can I get access to, or who can I learn from that could help me improve that level, like make me feel like I'm at a 8 or a 9 or a 10 out of 10 in terms of my health, and doing that in all of those areas of life. So it's not just about career, it's also about being honest with yourself about how happy and satisfied you are in each of your life's domains, and then taking the initiative to do something about it. Because everybody has a focus or something that is their area of expertise. So it's very easy, particularly now in terms of just being able to jump on Google and search something. You can easily find someone who can give you some guidance, or like you can do the research on it and then you can make the decision to improve that. So that can happen across all of those areas.
Which you asked earlier about where I've had mentors in the past, and it is, as you said, yes, you have to be self-aware, but you have to show the initiative. I think your health one was a great example. There's lots of people who go, I'm not as healthy as I could be. And there is then that question of, am I showing the initiative to do something about it or not? And if I'm going to, a mentor's going to help me. If I'm not going to show the initiative, no one's going to help.
Yeah, absolutely. Like just caring enough about something to do something about it. But I also think that comes this where we started with this was the concept of self-knowing. And my view of self-knowing is, who am I? What do I stand for? And what's the vision I hold for my life? And I think when you have a vision of the life that you want to lead, that is like your true north. And that's what you spend time moving towards on a daily basis. And I think if you don't have that vision of what you're moving towards, it's very easy for nothing to change. And so it's really fundamental that you have a vision of what you're moving towards in your life. And so you're actively working on all of those areas so that you can, at the end of your life, you can turn around and be immensely satisfied with the effort that you made and the feeling that you arrived at a place that you always wanted to be at, as you traveled through those younger years.
And others will help you on the way. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think when you show initiative, like I know when I'm dealing with people, anybody who's making an effort, I really feel very supportive of them, because when someone is putting in the effort to be more, like to become more or like to progress their life, you want to help them. Yes. You want them to get there. And so those people tend to attract even more support, because when they're putting in the effort, like you want to help people who put in effort because they want to help themselves. So you want to help them too.
So if we reflect on who we are, what our past is, what our strengths and weaknesses are, intentionally go to improve that, we're more likely to access mentors.
Absolutely. I think you attract them. Most
Okay.
definitely.
No, I think that's a really good summation of being self-aware and getting help in that. So
yeah.
no, thank you.
Thank you, Jeffrey, and hopefully everyone feels inspired and looks around and helps, looks to help others and also isn't afraid to get the support they need to stretch, in their lives as well.
Yes. Thank you all. See you next time.
Bye.